Shirley here with Sirius Talis Moon, and this is an episode of Behind the Blood that tends to the real estate, but also to a home, also relationally. It is inspired by an experience I had energetically, and the experience was of the energy of a person residing within the energy of another person. And the question, although the energy that asked this was, I believe, married, but it denoted to something very important that I will address and also is impacted by and affects real estate. And this was the question of, am I a guest, namely within the energy or in the home of that the person is to another, or is it my home? And this pertains to the sense of belonging, to patterns of monogamy and non-monogamy, and unifies these with what it actually means to be or to have a home in praxis within the societies that own, let's say, real estate. And when we talk about, first of all, let's go back to that experience. What it evoked in me was the question of, have I had such an energy home and of residence? And the question is, if so, then so partially so that I don't remember, or I did not have maybe access to such memories. And indeed, the parent for whom I know the ascendant has Chiron in fourth house. I have Rahu Chiron in fourth house, which is home and residence. The ruler is also ruler of the seventh, which is why the notion of home and partnership comes to the forefront, and it's actually a separation that I felt was needed. And then when the attempts to make such separation exposed basically how a Marc Dutroux is created, and this is also why I did not have housing. Now, when we talk about the practicalities of, and I was not the only one who was reluctant when it came to certain things to do with housing or real estate, whether in profession, okay, whether the various professions or its contracts, its and so on and so forth. But to me, it affected even residence, housing. And I speak in the previous two episodes about the practices, the dissociation, the crimes, of what is asked of people to do to participate in the circles of people that are landowners or house owners, or even have a house, whether it's a public house, as we saw in case of Marc Dutroux in Belgium, and it affects also the question of the energy question, because in order to have a home in someone energetically, or being one another's home, um, the constancy of relation need to be there, and it is a result of a constancy of sense of self, which is also life energy, and is also the real estate aspect about a housing. Um, During COVID, when I was in between houses, the question of what is a home, curation of lineage or ancestry, questions around a home were coming about. And if I take a look at the reality of what people that have a home also as real estate, that it's their real estate, what do they have to do? There may have even been energies that thought that I was one of their family or lineage, and by the way, I don't know if they're right or wrong, and telepathically explained to me they murder and then they have another home. And I was so terrified from that. But it also exposed the fact that to have residence, to have a housing, people murder. And it's basically like that. They are trusted with an estate. Then imagine what they need to do to be, let's say, a person who is in charge of the legal contracts. um, yes, now, probably there is a lot of dissociation, but if they are meant to hold, I guess, a couple of estates, then they need to be conscious that they're doing that. So, and that maybe was how I was. I don't know the person that contacted me, or and with these things, people can cloak themselves in other identities. So, um, but this is basically. And later I would hear somebody in the astrology community talking about Andromeda that was tortured and kidnapped because she did not agree to sacrifice to Ares. and Ares is about killing the rapist. So, later I would be tortured and kidnapped, and I had to escape in a state. Um, so I guess in retrospective, only now I understand that people insinuated that I should murder someone, I guess, to have a home. And because I didn't do that, then they tried to dispose of me. And I try to solve this solution, think that people will not have to murder in order to be homeowners, in favor of everybody, because that serves extortion cult. And if it's younger children, and it's usually younger children, then they can be in dissociation, and then they can be glitches. Um, and so when people try to, let's say, recover from any trauma, whether sexual abuse or whatnot, or even depression or something like that, that would usually link to what is the source of those things, there is a limit on the access to recovery, which I addressed also in this episode. The pattern of creation of offender and the prevention of recovery from being victim, but also recovery from being offender. And it's beyond acknowledging that one was also offender, or that one in certain circumstances, for example, if I did not have a place to run to, then it would mean that I would be tortured or raped. If I would not be murdered, then I would need to rape and torture, and either I would be dissociated or I would have some sort of residence until the next time that they meet or something. And um, and this is including public housing. And they need to offer this to some sort of rituals that they do, or cause diseases or stuff like that. And this is why I expose these things, so that um, people will have a venue for residence, housing, um, recovery, and whether they were in the physical rituals of where they were also offenders, or whether they're trying to recover, and then it would uncover certain things. For example, if somebody, let's say, was in the physical rituals, and then this is so and so did that to me, so and so did that to me, and I'm like, wait a second, but if I listen to other people like Peggy and so on, Peggy Van Roy, I say, but in those ceremonies, people also had to be raping, which is important to know, because later somebody can recover from them and say, well, that person did that and that to me. And then people will not connect the dots that's how these ceremonies or rituals are going. And it's also because it causes dissociation from the violence, and basically people see things, but from lower astral, if they have harmonious Neptunian aspects, they can see either the false light or authentic light. Um, this is how people, I think, like Annika Lucas had, let's say, she discovered this guru Yogananda, okay, and the discovery of motherly love, and indeed, there was harmonious aspect of Neptune in the chart. I'm not going to get into um, the details of the chart, but and this affects the access to choice. And I will say it was to Venus. Venus is about value, and so through value, if it is day chart, then through Jupiter, because it's Venus in Jupiter sign. By the way, we have Venus Lilith, um, and if it is a night chart like me, then it's through Venus, and then access to the notion that, hey, I'm deserving of being well treated. I'm not deserving of this type of treatment, and this is criminal to treat people this way. Then this self-value allowed access to choice, and and even then, that harmonious aspect from Neptune was supporting recovery, which is necessary in order to um, maintain somehow living, because Annika Lucas had to recover in spite of she had no access to therapy that actually is good because of all many things. And but in my case, I have Chiron in conjunction Pluto and Neptune, which means that my own recovery disturbs and shakes the foundation of the system. I think it also created a little bit of a trigger for Lucas. She remembered the horrific abuse she went through that caused her to say no. And but it was before a course that she was having. Usually such things arise when people do courses like Shifting the Power, because like it's questions that she would run into from the participants, very likely, which was regarding the choice to come out of the cult, or the notion that there's a choice to talk about children, and the fact that they do the rituals, as I talk about in the previous episode, to the child has to convince them through action that they are really, really wanting this and so on, but the child doesn't actually have a viable choice. They don't. It's not like they can go back to their lives. And we saw indeed that Lucas had a person who was actually mafiosi, and he told her never to have sex in favor of anything, because this is where the exchange happens, is energy siphoning to rape. And if people go into what even they call sex work, which is, by the way, medically impossible. It causes medical implications that negate any sort of material prosperity on the long run. It's a financial bubble. Um, yeah, there's there's a lot of anecdotes that could become a book. um, and yeah, but this is where um, this is also why the Me Too did not go too far. The Me Too was tackling the core of 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 how extortion cults are created, which is rape. Um, and then that allows energy siphoning, which is with the stealing of the real estate, blame shifting, which causes people to think that poor people or raped people made bad choices with their lives, and so, and then the looting of the extortion cults themselves, which is by exposing their crimes and then presenting them as a monster, pure evil, and whatever names we hear, without addressing the pattern that created that monster. And the and this is also why we see a lot of those exposures happening within the control of the people who still harm humanity. Now, when we talk about a home, we talk about belonging, we talk about secure attachment. We need a sense of self, and we need to honor erotic, non-erotic self for that home to be. Whether that home is, let's say, two, or that home is two having each a home, but inside, whether if people live in different residences, they energetically can feel like they share a home in one another, and um, and those basically practices of these societies, they intervene in that, in the ability to have such um, experience. At least for me, I can speak for myself. Um, because to have a home in one, that would mean that what our actions would need to support a home, and having to, let's say, murder someone so that we will have residence, or and then hide forever our actions, creates all kinds of things that also affect the home. Um, and um, and indeed, we see, even for the case of Mark Dutroux, we had public housing, but the housing dependent on that he will be a sex offender, and he was married for many, many years to a woman that it is said that he has tried his best to protect her from the network, and she had to cover up for his crimes. And when we still have the residues of what were his crimes, it was not only his crimes, but he was in a kind of like an Epstein role for that network. Um, and my objective of speaking about it is so that that can change, so that people will not have to commit such atrocities to have housing, to and it's actually because the infants are raped and energy siphoned that they believe that they have to do the same in order to have wealth, and they believe that they will get so and so housing. For Mark Dutroux it was public housing, but at least what we know, probably had more hidden, but and so abundance. We're not going to talk about roundhouse. Thank you. Intergenerational wealth. But this is this is important because when we talk about trust funds, the children, they have to commit crimes in order to inherit the property or to become part of the family business or to enjoy the trusts that are deposited for the children. So to unlock the money from the trust, they need to commit crime, and this is only allowed when they are since infants or since children attacked. Mspiracy talks about this, where the children are attacked. Except for me, I saw only Mspiracy talking about this. And I'm really happy when more people mention this. Um, and by the way, it's also for the people that around the end of Saturn in Pisces. I have to find this. I need to find this now. Now you're going to see all of the videos of Tanya Groen. Um, mm, no, this is my videos I'm looking for. It's the person that talked about this, that a lot of the younger generation wanted wealth over the type. Yes, look at the funny thing. Well, I'm talking about all the time, talking about Angela's symposium is starting a cult. um, um, conspiracy, but this is. They always have this name like Cosmic Astrology. This is Cosmic Intelligence, the channel that I was looking about to talk about the teeth and the connection to these things. And by the way, teeth is also depth. But where will I find this now? Oh, I don't find him. Seizure Girl is back. Okay. Yep. Yet. Nay. I don't find this. No, so I over this name. But basically, he mentioned the fact that many people want to make wealth without having to torture, rape, and energy siphon, which brings a financial downfall. If you to look at King James, he was known eventually for the witch hunt and for the 30 Years' War. While in fact, when he began, before he did all these energy siphoning rituals and torturing the women and stuff like that, when he began, he wanted to have immediately signing peace with Spain, unifying the kingdom, wanting to make rights for the Scottish people, and then because and he was gay, like, and but then he witch hunted, and that caused him. He basically siphoned their energy while blaming them for doing such things to him. And this caused the big downfall of the kingdom. And what he'll probably be known for is the 30 Years' War and the witch hunt, although he unified the kingdom and wanted to bring rights for the Scottish people. Um, and this is showing us just um, what the rituals of energy siphoning do to people that practice them. Um, and I saw it myself. They say certain people that did such rituals or were involved, or that such rituals were done for their company, and I was the victim. Some of them even in jail, which is. um, and now it's important to understand that with these children, they are raped and they are energy siphoned, and they are taught that this is the only way to basically gain, I don't know, wealth or energy or whatnot. Um, and this is completely false. As astrologer, when I did in Spirit of Matter channel, I did the Spirit of Matter. I was taking charge of celebrities, philosophers, actors, and so on and so forth. I was reading the Wikipedia of the person, and I was trying to see what would I see in the chart. And more often than not, I had something that was either the exact same planet or the equivalent type of planet that would create the same thing, meaning they had it in their own. They should have never had to energy loot anybody. And whatever people did that was based on energy siphoning, which is rape and torture and ritual to siphon with the energy to receive stuff, it creates a total economic collapse, but collapse of their endeavors. And probably other implications that I don't know about. So me doing that series is actually, I hope, can assist to come out of these 22 loops, um, allow recovery, and basically restore human rights, which will also be benefic. Let's say if even somebody did such a thing to me, and they no longer do that, then they can begin to heal. But the atmosphere around them, for example, if they're right now they're in jail, they could be tortured again so that they can to recreate that. And this is affecting all of us badly, and it's completely over nothing, because to begin with they shouldn't have looted that, because they have it in their own life energy. They just need to recover from energy siphoning that was done to them by other members of their societies, and the abuse that happened to them. What's more, those are to do with classified projects, paperclip, and by the way, specifically paperclip. Paperclip is still on, full on, and yeah, and this is a lot of people had a toxic relationship, and they say, "Oh, I was married to a narcissist," and so on and so forth. Basically, it means they were married to somebody that was in those societies, and that was they had to survive by domination. And so, another thing that comes up with these things is that they always have to show that they are committing treason. Otherwise, they cannot be in connection, which of course interferes with that sense of consistent home. um, and so, but this can also affect people's housing, um, and this can create for people a feeling that they are a guest in another person, but it also is a guest in one's own person. And it touches on, I guess, more the type of experiences that are non-verbal. So sometimes it's difficult to describe them verbally, but it also touches on very practical things like the home. For people can have a mansion, but for that mansion to be a home, certain things need to be that are not just physical. And people can have a home, but for them to have a house, um, we need to change what would they need to do to have a house. And when we are all aware that to have a house they would need to debt room, and that has irrevocable effects, then to change that to get out of that ghetto or to get out of that prison, rather than to find oneself free within the prison, which is a coping mechanism that's very understandable, then we need to address those things, and the fact that those things are committed at the junctures of recovery. And by the way, recently, or not so recently, also including divinations, healers, and astrologers, side by side with the treat, which means, oh, we're going to establish a field of astrology that people need and can have a certification in. Okay, it's like the treat, and I saw it with even the holistic healing, whether it's reflexology, aromatherapy, and so on. It's like, oh, we're gonna have a code of conduct so that people will know one is not a charlatan. My teacher had to attempt to sacrifice me in order to buy a home, and she actually wanted me to be her TA, and is done by torture. And eventually she had alopecia back then, and then I somehow managed to escape. And she also tried to help me before that. And eventually, at the war, a member of their family name, young boy that was in filmmaking, was killed. He was killed trying to save people from the Nova Party. So this is, and I saw it only recently. I was taking the train, and from the train I took off in the university station where I usually don't take off, and then on one of the electric poles there was the face and the name of him, and I'm like, wait a second, this is the same family name. And she told me back then it's a big family. And then her sister, I saw her in Disney clothes. She was also doing some astrology, something with the fabric, natural fabrics with textile. Very talented family, but what they had to do to have housing. And I refused to do that. I refused to take loan from black market. Even when I was working, it was such that, let's say if I was working in university, and let's say there was after the subprime debt, then it would immediately be reported to all the ministries. So I was hiding nothing. I did not have my own bank account, but I was hiding nothing, because all the authorities knew about this, and they knew that it was before they made the law that that the bank cannot refuse. And I was paying my debt. It was not like that everything was reported, but it was before they had the law that the bank cannot refuse a person to open a bank account if they had certain debt that they could not fully immediately repay. And this is what they didn't want. They wanted to traffic me. They wanted me to be a trafficker. They wanted me to be a Ghislaine Maxwell. In retrospective, I understand these things. And also, I do this series so that people can have a chance to come out of doing crime. There are a lot of people that are, I know in Epstein survivors, the young girls, they had to find girls for Epstein because it was painful for them to be raped, and they tried to alleviate the burden. And so it's very likely what happened to my second course of aromatherapy teacher, because she was just buying a house, she was doing all the shadow work and everything, and they forced her to do something that had serious impact, including that, because they were thinking to sacrifice me. And then the person that tried to save people, and very likely she was targeted because she tried to help people. Not only me, she was a healer. Later she would turn into something like a doula or something like that. And she was tortured in her womb. um, when we would see the things that later happened in the Nochba, in the Nochbas, in the Nova. Now, and those things happen to some sort of people from the elite. I don't know exactly positions, but it's not impossible that even decision makers today had endured them, where they had gone forcible to torture gender change. And to be doctors, people would have to put people through that torture to have certification and so on and so forth. It can be that Tanya Chun did not want to participate in such rituals, and thus, but we have to take into account that the Tanya Chun was tortured and had participated in such rituals also as offender prior to her death, because those things can come up, and without understanding uh, things that ritual abuse survivor talk about, then we basically cannot solve, not only cannot solve these cases, but also um, everyone basically doesn't actually get to recover, and people perpetuate those beyond atrocities that can be prevented.